Hi there, you're watching Grumpy Opinions. Outlander on Starz TV is a drama set in the 18th century and all about the Frasers, a group of time travellers and non-time travellers living out the days in pre-independence America, just on the edge of the War of Revolution. Episode 5, Give Me Liberty, starts out back in Scotland in 1745, and wouldn't you know it, it's only Bonnie Prince Charlie in a bonnet sneaking past some guards with the help of Flora MacDonald, who is a person who's famous for doing that, and not much else as far as I know. And then later on we zoom back to normal times and catch up with Jamie and Claire, and they're in Wilmington where he's off to meet with some rebel dudes, led by this guy and Chips and Beans Oscar Isaac. And after they have a bit of a thumb war, they decide to talk about a movement where one day they're going to lead to the War of Independence proper happening. But there's other stuff happening as well, because Jamie and Claire are off to meet Aunt Jocasta, and she's running a big do where Flora MacDonald, the same lady from the episode's Cold Open, is giving a big talk. But nobody's really sure if she's going to come down on the independence or unionist side of things. And in the middle of that, there's a whole load of how you doing chat between the ladies and various lads before Jamie can come clean with J-Boy. They end up getting distracted when things kick off back in town, and Jamie and John end up helping out a printer who gets shot in the arm, and Jamie gets a bit of splatter of tar on him.
I hate when that happens.
You know, tar actually sticks to some people.
And Jamie's crossed because it turns out Jocasta's behind this sort of pro-Crown pamphleteering, and Jamie has a word with her, and that about giving Fungus a free printer press and then coaxing him to move away. After that, Jamie decides it's time to come clean with John about his side on the revolution, and John's not happy about that, but he's also not going to dob him in, and even though they did plan to storm a secret meeting that night, and Jamie says, well, I'm off to that, so difficult. And Jamie turns up, and nobody's happy to see him because of the business with the printer earlier, but he gives a rousing speech and then lets them know that the bad guys are coming, so it's time to skedaddle. And then next day, him and Claire are off, but not before she hears a strangely familiar tune being whistled. Odd. Meanwhile, back on the ridge, the lassies are having a bit of a route around looking for a site to build a water wheel, and they find this kind of weird occult nastiness made of finger bones and all sorts of badness. Looks like the White Walkers are on the way or something, but then they work out it's actually a love spell, and it all gets a bit too much for Lizzie, who swoons clean over and has to be tended to by the twins. Meanwhile, Briana gets kind of miffed at Roger because he's spending all his time away with Hot Widow Amy, who clearly likes his tunes and wants a bit more from him than some music. But Bree doesn't really need to worry because he's only got eyes for her, and he gets somebody else to help out with her problems, and gets a bit unco happy to find out she's up the duff again, and Parsley's happy as well when she spots that Bree's expecting, and it's kind of sad to say bye, and she's off to live with Fungus and the printers in the elsewhere. And just in case things were going too well, Roger catches wee Malva at it with a local boy on the church floor, and the wee bism threatens to say that she saw him snogging the widow if he tells on her, so he doesn't, and he leads her out the back door, and soon enough we see that actually she's the one who's been chopping fingers off a very, very dead dude who lives in a tent somewhere. Ooh. So what did I think? Well, an awful lot happened this week, and actually I liked an awful lot of it. I mean, there was some really interesting bits and bobs and changes, like for example, obviously, starting off back in 1745 with Bonnie Prince Charlie and the story of him and Flora MacDonald. I mean, I've got to be honest, I really don't know that much about her story other than she helped him dress up and then they got away on a boat, because that's all they actually taught us about at school. Anyway, beyond that, it was really interesting because also the entire opening credits was completely different. It was all just that boat journey, which kind of makes sense because the Skye boat song is literally about the story of him crossing the sea to Skye. And it was an interesting choice to do it in Gaelic again, but this time just keep it solely the male voice, because obviously it's about Bonnie Prince Charlie this time rather than Jamie and Claire. And yeah, also, I liked a lot of the stuff that happened in the story because we actually got away from the ridge for a chunk of the time, and you know, we got into what Outlander does best, which is big gatherings and parties where everybody dresses up and people talk about things and stuff while weirdness goes down around them. And yeah, as well as all the pomp and the beauty and the style of everything, it was really nice to see Jamie and Claire kind of rubbing shoulders with important people, you know, rather than just having them round for dinner or whiskey at their house, which feels like that's all that's happened for the last couple of seasons. Also, we got a chance to get, you know, Lord John back, as I said, and the Bonnie Prince, as I said before, although unlikely we'll see him again.
Last I heard, he was in Italy, quietly drinking himself to death.
But yeah, it was nice to get some political shenanigans in between the governor, Lord John, Jamie, the uprisers, and all of that kind of stuff that, to be honest, I enjoy quite a lot, more than some of the soap opera type sides of the story. As well, we also got Claire talking with Flora and Jocasta while they all got lit sitting around a table. I mean, that was a choice. I mean, literally, Jocasta's puffing on a hash pipe, Flora's necking whiskey from a flask, and Claire, well, I mean, she waits for everybody to go away and then she goes straight into the ether binge. I mean, this time she literally goes full Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, plastering a hanky of it straight to her face, leaving the mask at home. And it was interesting to bring back the whole sex with the king thing, the Versailles flashback. And it's interesting because that was almost done as a joke when they did it in the original season 2. But yeah, because obviously it bounced straight off the edge of all that kind of weird witchy woo stuff that was happening. And I'm glad that they tied this into her trauma, and the fact that obviously talking about those days and that event might bring back a flashback of something in her head which relates to her recent trauma. And that's an interesting choice. And again, I'm really curious to know where this is all going. And on a similar thread of interesting choices, I like that the whole Roger and Bree and Amy the Hot Widow storyline didn't descend into something bad. There weren't any villains there. There was just Roger unthinkingly being nice and polite and kind and trying to help out this lady in trouble. And then that woman, understandably, enjoying him being around and being lonely, wanting him to be there more, and obviously starting to think and hope that maybe he might be there all the time. And then Bree seeing what was going on and not being angry or cruel or unkind or jealous, just saying enough to reassure her man and make him realise what was going on, while not blaming him or accusing him of stuff. I mean, it's healthy. This is what a healthy relationship looks like, and I'm surprised to see it in this show, because most of the time the relationships aren't healthy. Really, they're not. And to be honest, probably because we're seeing these two people who have a sort of 1970s mindset rather than the 1940s, 1950s mindset of Claire or the 18th century mindset of Jamie and others. And, I'm glad that there's a bit of a mystery in the air and something's up with Malva, and we saw that she's got quick wits, and clearly she's a bit of a wee hooer and possibly a bit mental, or possibly even an actual witch. Only time's gonna tell. But on the other hand, one aspect of the Malva storyline that bugs me a bit is they're so heavy-handed with close-ups of her every 2 seconds. I mean, it's almost like they're afraid the audience might miss the unsubtle comment she's making, and the wee looks that they have to actually crash cut to close-ups of her face every few seconds, just in case we miss her, like doing a bit of a I'm thinking about it face. And, we didn't need to see her doing, like, the dead man's hand cutting, the church sex, and all these extreme close-ups every 2 seconds all in the same episode. I mean, maybe that should have been spread out over earlier episodes. I mean, yeah, there have been a few subtle hints of her doing things in previous episodes, but at this point they just went, to hell with it, yeah, let's just go full in. Also, it's bizarre because I had the opposite problem with the Wilmington storyline. Now, this could be part of my general lack of knowledge of American history, because I was completely confused about the whole thing about the guy printing the pamphlets, and who was actually against him and why, because basically, I wasn't sure who was attacking him, and then when they defended him, who was actually behind it, because Jamie seemed to find out that Jocasta was behind it. But surely she would have been before the rebellion, because she loved Myrta, and he was against the state and for the rebellion. So honestly, I was no wiser at the end of the scene here than I was at this point here. And I'm still not entirely sure what was going on. I've complained that things have felt slow in this season, but this week, everything took a massive time jump, and I'm not sure how far forward we are from the previous episodes, because it feels like we've missed weeks and basically episodes full of setups and goings on. And I get that some things can be filled in, like, the fact that Fungus went off last week, and now we find out that there's been a fait accompli, and he's been basically given this printer's press, and Parsley's off to be with him soon, and that's a done deal. Now, great, okay, I can get behind that, that's fine. But yeah, also, Wilmington's weeks away from the Ridge, and they've obviously gone on a great big trip. It just seems strange to me that all this stuff is completely out of the blue, unless I've missed something in a previous week. But I presume this is all stuff from the book. There would have been mentions of it that they just haven't found time for, which again, speaks kind of badly to how they're kind of prepping these storylines on the show. Also, this dude at the end, honestly, I had no idea who he was. I think I figured out he was the guy from the end of last season who was talking about Ringo Starr. But it took me forever to work out, and it was only when I realised, of course, the reason he stole the gem was because he's probably a time traveller. But to be honest, it's been so long since we've had any time travelling and stuff, I'd completely forgotten about the gem thing. So yeah, eventually I worked that out, but that was well after I saw the episode. Also, it felt like a bit of a half-assed ending scene in this bit, considering we already had Malva and her corpse pilfering, which felt much more like that should have been the big finale last shot of the episode. But maybe that's just me. So yeah, for better or worse, this week was certainly an improvement on last week, and it had some nice callbacks. But one thing I would like to mention, and I don't think this is a good or a bad thing, it's just something I noticed, is that there definitely seems to be a lot of callbacks this season. A lot of callbacks to things that have happened before, and I'm not sure if that's intentional or just random happenstance. But like, for example, a couple of episodes ago where there was a callback to, remember the thing in the very first episode of Mrs. Graham looking up when Claire and Frank were having sex in the room above? And this time we've got Mrs. Bug looking up when Jamie and Claire are having sex upstairs. I mean, that, and then we're actually having literal flashbacks of like Claire's weird dream was all these different bits of people from their past. And then we've got literally like the Versailles flashback, but we also had the prince back in this one. And I'm sure I've missed a few other ones. So maybe that's going to be the thing of this season. Maybe this season's all about looking back, which is odd because the season seems more like it's about looking forwards. But anyway, maybe this will go somewhere and it'll make more sense later on in it. But yeah, it's not a good or a bad thing. As I said, it's just something I noticed. And I don't have much else to say on this other than at least things finally seem to be moving, but that could just be because we're changing pace and actually the background story of the war is picking up pace. So we'll find out next week if things are really on the roll now in this season and we've got a proper hook of a storyline to get really meated into, which you would hope by episode 5 or 6 of 8. But yeah, till next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.